Hey guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk about minimalism and recreation and ADHD to a little bit. Firstly, I'm not the original minimalist, and these are just my thoughts. I was watching The Minimalists this week, and they were talking about graduation. Kind of what is the nature of taking on so many things as somebody with ADHD? And my mind is always trying to find novelty, and then it goes into a hyper focus on something really intensely. So to the outside person, it might seem like, oh, it's a superpower, you're able to just do everything. And when it comes to job skills or, house repair, yeah, it certainly can feel like that. But on the other hand, a jack of all trades is a master of none. And that's something that let me tell you a little bit more about. All right, so let's get specific. I want to talk about different issues that I've found keeping multiple activities going, and then my conclusion will come around at the end. So obviously, if you've watched the channel, you know I do a ton of different things. I'll start with an easy one. Martial arts. I've been in various martial arts 30 years, and different styles, there's different nuances. I'm not going to get into discussions about why you might or might not practice. I think that's very personal for each person. But let's start with stretching. Many systems have their own stretching, and martial artists are often display really high levels of flexibility. Ooh, stretchy. But the stretches are specific to the goal. And if you're to take on a system like yoga or certain mobility training, your muscles, they could tear due to overstretching. Breathing with one might kind of work against the breathing system of another. And even in my system, a former grandmaster once complained that the really rigorous finger training that he did as a youth, made his fingers really hard, but it also made it really hard to hold a brush or a pen in his later years when he wanted to write poetry or paint. All right, well, let's talk about it in something a little more close to this channel and what I talk about here. So in running, I would often find myself wanting to push distances further and further, go 5K now, go 10K. And then I'd also want to go play some disc golf. Well, okay, now sure, a quick walk of 2 miles doesn't sound bad. But it's often uneven terrain, it's at a varied pace, and often I would get a lot of calf tweaks, problems like that, because I'd be trying to do them together. So what about climbing? Well, look, for me, climbing quickly made it apparent that regular weight training would cause issues. Channel I'm sure some of you are familiar with, Hooper's Beta, has done some really in-depth discussion on this topic, as well as running and climbing. And all things basically boil down to what isn't helping can hurt. Now I know what some of you are thinking, you probably want to talk about progressive overload. But to be honest, when you think about stretching 5 days a week for 20 minutes, hangboarding twice a week for 45 minutes, and then climbing once a week for a few hours, you have to get to the regular gym once a week, you have to try to run a few times a week. This gets taxing really fast. Not only that, but I'm still working a full-time job. Okay, and I think a lot of my audience is too. Occasionally, I like to do things besides just exercising. Now, the limitations, therefore, for most of us are going to come from a time perspective. Now, I'm sure I have a few busy college students that have the time, and, if you can, or, you're in a situation where you can climb more, good for you. Just realize that many, if not all of you, will eventually join the workforce. You're going to have the demands of money on your time, and that's going to severely limit your ability to do all these things. Hey, now look, I'm not saying give up all your hobbies, but it's good to get a grasp on what conflicts with what so that you aren't working against yourself. Now, one of my favorite examples of this is disc golf and axe throwing. I love both. They're really fun to do, but I often throw front hand in disc golf. So if I spend a whole day playing disc golf and go to throw an axe, now all of a sudden I'm throwing it sideways. Or I've been throwing axes all day and all of a sudden I start throwing overhands with disc golf instead of front hands. This causes a lot of problems. And I've actually found it's inevitable. Even when I'm focusing on it, it still does that because your bodies get used to the pattern and you have to shift the pattern. So you're not going to get your best effort out of that. Now, how does minimalism affect the decision here? Can't we just find a way to make time for everything that adds value? No. And I need to say again for the ADHD kids, you cannot do everything that might add value to your life. Right? Keto, paleo, vegan diets, they've all shown beneficial effects for some. But try putting all that together you're probably going to feel a little bit more like an animal and you might start acting like one. What's the problem with minimalism and ADHD? Well, for me, letting go, saying to my brain, I can't do something, and then I want to do it more. Right, and thus I don't respond well to eliminating things in a traditional sense. I just want to talk to the approach I'm taking, have taken, to let go of things and not have them creep back into life. So, first question, and this is number one, most important thing that you can think about here, is do you need to eliminate it at all? Now, I used to be a competitive chess player, so I've done a whole lot of activities, but there's rarely time enough to study back then to get really good. I found myself less and less excited to study, struggling to get to the tournaments, and I ended up giving up a lot of my chess sets and gear. Instead, just kept an app on my phone and a little portable set, and one really nice set. So great. Now I gave myself permission to stop playing ranked. I don't have to pay the yearly fees, and I don't have to spend money on all these different sets and competition entries and all these things. I still love the game, but I play it when I want. Being a grandmaster is not in my future. So if you let go, what is the cost? There's always a cost. I haven't talked about my stepping away from axe throwing, because when I first started it, I actually thought it was going to be a really big thing in my life in North Carolina. The whole Viking energy, I even gave in. I chose a Viking hairstyle, and more on that later. Well, it turns out I haven't played much using my official throwing axes in almost 2 years. When I do, I often use rentals because the places I go to, they don't let you bring your own axe anyway. Great, I've got a couple of axes, possibly for sale, by the way, and it's an okay thing to do, but I'm not going to put the energy into learning it a whole lot more than I already have, because practically not being able to hit a blue dot at 30 feet is not a major loss to me. If I end up defending myself by knowing an axe, I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty sure I'm going to need some other weapon after I throw the axe, so I probably wouldn't want to throw it to begin with, and I'm pretty sure if I'm hurling an axe at you, it's going to hurt no matter how it hits, but getting precise enough to throw at all these different distances when you're only practicing at a competition range, that's not necessarily realistic. So you have to ask yourself, what skill do you give up there? And for me, that's a skill I'm willing to give up. We talked about skill cost and things like that, but what is the cost of the activity? Not just money, but time and energy. Running and climbing have this in common, right? You've got to get some good shoes. In the case of climbing, you probably need some chalk, you need some friends, and you're good. But the thing is that both are also incredibly taxing on the body's energy systems. So for instance, most of us can't run a 10K a day after a climbing competition. And you can't expect to get better at either one if you do something like that within a few weeks, unless that's how you train regularly. Since we're on that subject, let's talk about hidden costs. So here's the thing. A lot of you might get into climbing or started off getting into climbing thinking this is going to be super cheap. I just get a monthly membership to the gym and that's the cost. Okay, let me just break this down for you a little more because I want you to understand what you're getting into. There is the gas to get to the gym. You may eventually want clothing that doesn't rip at the gym and handles chalk, so you go to buy that. So you're not that guy wearing the basketball shorts at the gym. The chalk you use every session costs money. Climbing shoes wear out regularly. Anywhere from 6 months to a year is when most shoes wear out. You're taxing your system, so you're going to need to add food and possibly protein for recovery. You're likely to get some injuries here and there, which may cost you time off work to get resolved. It may just make daily life more difficult. And hey, let's throw in some wants too, right? A lot of us are going to get into those wants. Well, if you want to get on ropes, you're probably going to get a harness, and nylon degrades over time, so you got to replace it. Now you want to get on lead, guess what? Well, you're going to need a new rope every year, probably. You're going to need a whole rack of draws, and you're going to need a specialized bag to hold all of that, probably with a little protector thing for the ground. And if you don't want to hurt your neck, you might want belay glasses. Don't forget a helmet if you're taking it to rock. You're also going to need snacks for the day. more gas to get an outdoor location. You're going to need a crash pad for bouldering, probably some friends. Okay, they don't cost money, but it's still hard to come across. Maybe several pads if you're doing harder projects. You might need tape to cover your injuries, special chalk if you really like specialized chalk. Some have moisture or anti-moisture items in them, things like that. You might want some approach shoes later on, different clothes for outside based on the weather, belay devices, nail clippers, hydration packets. This is just a small sample of all the costs that can come into climbing. No activity is cheap to go far in, and climbing is no exception. Now, some climbers might say, oh, hey, dirtbaggers, Yosemite didn't need that stuff, and they'd be right. But most of us can't live van life. And huge props to those who can. Something maybe I would be interested in the future. But if you don't live in a van, your life might have room for a few more things out of necessity. And if you want the money you spend to aid you, you want it to go as far as possible. And since I'm on the topic of cost, there is a social cost and benefit to consider. I've made a lot of great friends through climbing, and honestly, many of the activities that I do. They serve the function of being third spaces for people to connect, especially climbing gyms, but they can also be places to isolate. I cannot tell you how many people I have seen at the gym wearing headphones, and hey, I don't expect everybody to become friends when you walk around in a sound bubble. And that's fair. If you like doing that, that's cool. But that means less time that you could spend with people you do want to be around if you don't want to talk to people at the gym. I've known boulderers who go out to rock solo with their own crash pad, no spotter. I'm not saying I recommend that. In fact, please, I don't recommend that. But I've met people who won't go to the gym without their friends too. So there's all kinds of welcome, but know the cost benefit your activity has on your social life, because it is hard to celebrate your victories alone. All right, since we're talking about minimalism or essentialism, what's your long game? Right, when I was still new to rock climbing in the early 2000s, I dreamed about being like Chris Sharma. I wanted to travel the world to climb, but I also had to attend college and eventually get a job. And to be honest, I didn't set the pieces up correctly for that long game to happen. And here I am, 20 years later. Now I am traveling and climbing, but not on Prana's dime. At least not yet. I'm going to be honest. I don't think that would have been a good thing, because I wouldn't have the knowledge of business or the life experiences that I have had. And honestly, I probably would have gotten sick of climbing if I had gone pro much earlier. So it's a very important thing to ask yourself why you're doing this activity. And are the steps you are taking moving you towards that goal or away from it? Now, keep in mind, your life goals are important here. If you want to climb the corporate ladder, I'm gonna be honest, looking like a dirtbag climber hippie who cusses all the time, wakes up at 10 a.m. in his van every day, that may not help you. Not saying it'll always hurt, but often it can work against you. Okay, I'm not saying climbers can't be corporate or anything like that. Just understand that if you're going to one of those extremes, it has natural consequences associated with the lifestyle. And while it will open some doors for you, other doors close. Okay, so you might ask yourself at this point, what am I doing all this for? Why are you talking about this? Well, when I started this channel, I was convinced I could do all these activities, but I wasn't sure how far to take each one. And I guess reflecting on it, I see that the climbing has remained the thing that brings me the most joy of all the other activities. And as such, the other activities need to complement it. So I changed my weight training. I used to do completely free weight bodybuilding exercises, and I switched it into strength training, climbing movement exercises. Honestly swapped out my notions of going to 10Ks and half marathons to being happy with the 5Ks that I run once or twice a week and reducing my overall running load. Some weeks I may not even run. I have taken the stretching that I did for daily life and I've shifted it and I've targeted it to climbing, so I'm more able to excel in this area. And there's a video on that coming soon. Now, for me, this is like focusing a beam of light. If you want something to burn red hot, all the energy needs to go in that one very specific direction. Okay, so what about disc golf? Okay, I'm not one of those people who's cutting it out forever, but I'm honestly not sure yet. The extra load is a little bit intense and it's a lot of ballistic motion. I may play when I get a day off here or there, but I'm just not making it a priority for myself. Joshua Fields Milburn is well known for talking about the concept of priorities, and he often says the origin of the word is that which comes first. And from an activity standpoint, I want to choose climbing as the first among the things that I do. That which helps my climbing being second, that which was not affecting the climbing being third. And while that which hurts climbing, that kind of needs to get eliminated. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to reduce to one thing, but for many of us, especially if you're working full-time, this can be really beneficial to you. I also want to add a point for those with ADHD like me. Now, I want to be very clear, I am straight up diagnosed with ADHD, I'm not self-diagnosed, and it can often be a question for us of how do I keep it fresh? Okay, so first off, give yourself permission to obsess or not, and keep doing it. But also, if you get bored, step away for a few weeks, right? Deload sessions. Another thing is to keep changing. Change the training protocols, the emphasis. Consider trying new things within the activity. If you're a boulderer, go for a run, do some sport climbing. If you primarily run or climb sport, try some bouldering, try some sprints, go do kilter boards, right? There really is an infinite number of ways to keep an activity fresh instead of just always having to try something new. But you have to deviate from the way it is done in the name of continuing the activity, because just doing it is going to help you a ton. So I hope this has been informative for you. And in the spirit of letting go of the past, well, I did mention the why behind my hair a little bit earlier, but I think I'm going to be letting go of that as well moving forward so that I can try new things. I want to keep this a little more interesting for me. I've had this hairstyle for several years now, and I did get value out of it before, but not so much anymore. It's kind of getting in the way, so it's time to try something new. Now, if you've had some value from this video, please consider liking, subscribing. The channel could definitely use subscribers at this point. If you know somebody who might benefit from the videos that I'm sharing, please send it to them. And if you have an experience like with the recreational minimalism I talked about, or experiences taken on too many activities, I'd really like to hear from you. So please share it in the comments down below. Thank you so much.